He's a single dad, fixing a light at 2:00 a.m. in a house he thinks is empty. But when the door creaks open and a barefoot woman whispers, "Stay until it's over," he steps into a night that will change everything. Before we get started, while you're lying comfortably, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you really like what I'm sharing here. Comment below and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. Let's get started. Evan Cross didn't plan to be working at 2 in the morning, but life rarely asked for his permission. He pulled up in front of the sprawling mansion with the kind of tired that settles into your bones. The rain hadn't let up for hours, and his wipers squeaked with every pass, like they were begging for sleep too. In the back seat of his old Ford Ranger was a pink lunchbox, half a peanut butter sandwich, and a pair of muddy soccer cleats, evidence of the evening routine he'd left behind to take this last-minute job. A few extra bucks mattered, especially now. Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, had grown taller than he realized this week, her coat sleeves riding just above her wrists. She needed a new jacket, and maybe a new pair of sneakers. Evan was the kind of dad who noticed these things late, but made up for it by staying late. The estate was massive, the kind of place where people didn't knock, they were expected. Evan didn't even know who had called in the job. It came through a temp agency he worked with now and then. The request was vague lighting failure, urgent, discreet. Discreet he could do. Talking much wasn't his thing anyway. As he stepped into the entrance hallway, boots dripping rain onto the marble floor, the scale of the place hit him. Everything gleamed the chandelier above the polished banister, the art he couldn't begin to price. And yet there was an odd stillness. Not the silence of peace, but the kind you find in places where no one talks, because no one trusts. "Senor," a soft voice called from the side hallway. He turned. A woman in her 60s appeared, apron-tied, tight hair pulled back into a bun. Her name tag said Rosa. Her eyes scanned him quickly. Boots tool belt, the kind of weariness that isn't just physical. "Upstairs hallway," she said in a hushed voice. "She doesn't like loud noises." He asked. Rosa simply nodded and stepped back into the shadows. Upstairs, the light in question flickered just above a long corridor with high ceilings and tall windows. Evan set down his toolkit and got to work. It was a minor short, probably from moisture creeping into old wiring. Nothing fancy, nothing a steady hand couldn't fix. His mind wandered as he worked. To Lily curled up under the blanket they kept in the living room. To the lunchbox she insisted on packing herself. To the way she always said, "Don't forget to come back, okay," like it was a real fear. He was twisting a final wire into place when the silence broke. Not with a thud, not with a shout, just a soft creak. And then a voice, calm, clear, and so quiet, it made the air around it still. "Stay until it's over." Evan turned. She was barefoot, standing just at the edge of the hallway's light, the hem of her robe grazing the floor. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, but not in a wild, messy way, more like someone who had chosen not to. Her face was sharp, but not cruel. Beautiful, but not the kind that tried. Hair loosely tied lips, pale eyes, unreadable. "Sorry," he said, unsure if he'd woken her. But she shook her head and leaned slightly against the wall. "No, I meant don't rush, just stay a little longer." He didn't know what to say, so he didn't. Sometimes silence does more than words. She looked at the flickering bulb and gave a tired smile. That light used to stay on all night. "My mother insisted, said darkness was no place for a child." Evan didn't ask questions, not yet. He just nodded and took out a new bulb. Fact presenter voice gently woven in. Over 70% of single dads in America work multiple jobs or late shifts just to make ends meet. Most of them never ask for help, and most go unseen until someone chooses to look closer. As Evan tested the newly fixed light, it glowed steady. No more flickering. A soft halo spread down the corridor, revealing more of the woman. Her shoulders relaxed a little, as if the small act had repaired more than just a fixture. He packed up slowly. Normally, he would say something like, "That's done," and head out. But tonight, something about the way she was standing half in the shadows, half in the light, made him pause. "Do you want me to check the others?" he asked. She nodded once, then added, "I'll be here. Take your time." He moved to the next room, but his thoughts didn't leave the hallway. Who was she? Why was she alone in a mansion that felt more like a mausoleum than a home? Evan didn't know, and to be honest, he didn't expect to find out. Rich people had their own lives, their own griefs. His job was just to fix the lights. But something in her voice had cracked through the routine. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something unexpected. Not hope, not yet, but the faint, almost invisible possibility that tonight might not just be about broken wiring. The second light fixture was above a tall arched window in the reading room, a space Evan wouldn't have stepped into if he weren't on the job. The room was drenched in expensive stillness. Books lined the walls, the kind you don't borrow but inherit. A globe stood in the corner, a grand piano untouched. Even the dust felt refined. He set his ladder up and began unscrewing the casing. His fingers worked out of habit, but his thoughts kept circling back to her, the barefoot woman in the hallway. She hadn't said her name, hadn't offered him tea or small talk like most clients trying to be polite. But in that brief exchange, there was no sense of pretending. And for some reason, Evan respected that. A flash of lightning lit up the sky, followed by a low rumble. He looked out the window. The rain had intensified. Sheets of it danced across the wide driveway, turning the hedges and flower beds into dark silhouettes. He was tightening the last screw when he heard soft footsteps behind him. "You work quiet," she said. He turned and found her standing in the doorway this time, with a shawl draped over her shoulders, still barefoot, still watching him like she wasn't sure if he was real. "Habit," he replied. "Didn't want to wake anyone." "You didn't. There's no one to wake." Her voice was matter-of-fact, like she wasn't trying to make him feel sorry, just stating what was. She stepped further into the room and looked around. "My father designed this place to feel like a castle. High ceilings, wide spaces, but somehow it still feels like there's no air." Evan didn't know what to say to that, so he offered what he had. "I could take a look at the ventilation system." That made her smile, the first real one. "You fix more than you realize." She moved to the window and placed her hand gently on the glass. Lightning flickered again, this time closer. The storm was crawling over the hills, slow and deliberate. "Do you believe places can hold memories?" she asked. Evan hesitated. "I believe people can, and sometimes that's worse." She looked at him for a long moment. "You've lost someone." He nodded slow. "My wife, 4 years ago. Cancer." She didn't flinch or offer platitudes, just breathed in as if acknowledging the weight of those 4 words. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "You?" he asked gently. "My mother," she replied. "Heart failure, sudden." I was 17. We hadn't talked for 3 days before it happened. Her eyes didn't tear up, but they didn't need to. For a while, they just stood there. A single dad, in worn jeans with a screwdriver in hand. A billionaire's daughter in silence and stormlight. The room, once sterile, now felt softer. Evan finally broke the stillness. "You should probably get off your feet." "I've been on my feet too long," she said, trying to be someone my father approved of. "This is the first time in months I've stood still and felt not alone." The way she said "not alone" made Evan shift slightly, not in discomfort, just in recognition, because he knew that feeling too well. She walked to the piano and ran her fingers over the ivory keys, but didn't press them. "I used to play," she murmured. "But then people started expecting me to perform." "You stopped?" he asked. She nodded. It stopped feeling like mine. Evan didn't respond, but the way his hands gently repacked his tools, the way he took care with every small motion, it was as if he understood. About losing something that once belonged to you, slowly without a fight. Before leaving the room, she turned back to him. "Will you be working long?" "Just a couple more rooms, then I'll head out." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "Would it be strange if I asked you to stay a little longer just until the storm passes?" Evan blinked. No one had asked him to stay in a long time, not unless something was broken. But she didn't say it like a demand. She said it like a request from someone too tired to pretend she didn't need company. So he nodded. And with that, she whispered something he wouldn't forget for a long time. "Sometimes, you don't need to fix anything. Just stay until it stops hurting." The rain tapped the windows. The lights hummed softly. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet night, something unfamiliar began to form. Not romance, not yet, but something gentler. A sense that even in a mansion built to keep people out, a single dad with calloused hands and a woman with bare feet might just find their way toward the light. Evan hadn't planned on staying, but sometimes staying wasn't about planning. It was about recognizing when silence needed company more than answers. He followed her to the kitchen, a room that looked like no one had cooked in it for months. The counters were spotless. The fridge hummed softly. There was no clutter, no notes stuck to the door, no cereal boxes half open. It was clean the way a hotel room is clean, sanitized, unused. "I don't usually invite strangers into this part of the house," she said, walking ahead of him. He glanced around. You sure I'm not breaking some invisible rule? She smiled faintly. If you are, I'll pretend I didn't see it. In the dim light of the kitchen, Evan opened his bag. He didn't have much, just what Lily insisted he pack before every night shift. A foil-wrapped sandwich and apple, and a small bag of chips. I didn't expect to eat with anyone tonight, he said, laying them out on the counter. She pulled out 2 ceramic mugs from a cabinet and filled them with warm water from a kettle. No tea, no sugar, just warmth. Neither did I, she said. They sat on opposite sides of the island. She picked at the sandwich slowly, as if it were some rare delicacy. He took slow bites, more out of habit than hunger. For a few minutes, there was only the sound of rain and the occasional creak of the old house settling. It's not much, he said, glancing at her. No, she said quietly. It's exactly enough. That stopped him, because she didn't say it out of politeness. She meant it. My dad used to say, she added, the difference between luxury and love is that love always makes room even when there's nothing left on the plate. Evan let that sit, then offered, half joking, your dad sounds like someone who didn't have to share his sandwich. That made her laugh. The sound surprised them both. Fact presenter softly threaded in. In 2021, over 11 million Americans reported eating most of their meals alone. But studies show shared meals, even simple ones, can lower stress, build trust, and reduce emotional fatigue. Where's your daughter tonight? She asked. Sleeping, hopefully. I left her with Mrs. Kovach next door. She's 93 but insists she's sharper than I am. Probably right. And her name, Lily. She smiled. That's a strong name. Light in the dark. She's stronger than she knows, Evan said, voice soft. Keeps telling me she's fine with PB&J 5 nights a week. But the way she looks at other kids' lunches, I know she's just trying to protect me. She said nothing, but her fingers tightened around her mug. Like the idea of a child holding back for their parent, hit closer than she expected. He looked up. And you got someone? I did, she said. Once. But it turns out, the more money someone has, the easier it is for them to walk away without looking back. She didn't say it bitterly, just plainly like a weather report. Evan didn't push. He wasn't the kind of man who demanded the whole story. He'd learned that some people offer pieces not to explain, but to see if you'll hold them gently. So he just nodded. Their loss. She gave him a small smile. Maybe. Or maybe it took being left behind to realize I was never really seen. She reached for the last piece of sandwich and split it in half, placing one half gently back in front of him. I want you to have the last bite, she said. Why? Because I haven't shared anything real with someone in a very long time, and tonight it feels like real. Evan hesitated, then took it. Not because he was hungry, but because something about that gesture felt bigger than a crust of bread. It felt like trust. As the storm pressed harder against the windows, neither of them moved to check the forecast. They didn't talk about the past or the future. They just sat there, 2 people from very different worlds, sharing warmth from the only thing still holding it. A sandwich, a story, a silence. And in that silence, something unspoken began to form. Not love, not yet, but the first quiet promise, I see you. And I'm not turning away. It was close to 3 a.m. when Evan returned to the front hallway to pack up his gear. The rain hadn't stopped. If anything, it had become a steady drumbeat across the tall windows, as if the house itself was breathing with the storm. He coiled the last length of wire carefully, even though he was half asleep. Some habits don't loosen no matter how tired you are. Behind him, she was sitting again on the bottom step of the grand staircase. Her shawl had slipped a little from her shoulder, revealing a fine scar above her collarbone, thin white, almost imperceptible. But not quite. Evan didn't stare, but he noticed. The way people who've carried pain tend to recognize its signs in others. You don't have to wait with me, he said gently. I know, she replied, but if you're still here, then maybe I don't have to wait alone. He leaned against the banister. You get a lot of people passing through here. Not really, she said. Most don't make it past the gate. He smiled. Guess I was the exception. You didn't flinch when you saw the size of the place, she said. Most people get real careful around old money. You just asked where the broken light was. I don't flinch at houses, Evan said. I flinch at overdue utility bills. That made her laugh again, soft but sincere. Then she grew quiet. There's something about broken things, she said, that makes you pay attention. Like they're asking you to see what everyone else missed. He nodded slowly. And sometimes, they're not really broken, just tired. She stood and walked to the far end of the hall where a framed photo sat half-tucked behind a vase. She picked it up and turned it to face him. Two girls, maybe 6 or 7 years old, barefoot, holding hands on a stone step, the same staircase they stood by now. "That's me," she said, tapping the girl on the right. "And this," her voice caught, "was my sister." Evan waited. "She died in this house. Car accident. Coming home from her first solo drive. I was supposed to go with her that night, but I stayed back, argued with her over something small. Stupid." He didn't say "I'm sorry." He didn't offer empty comforts. Instead, he sat down on the step below her, rested his elbows on his knees, and let the moment stay real. Fact presenter woven softly. Grief doesn't always announce itself. Studies show many survivors of trauma carry invisible anniversaries, moments in time, that hit hard even if no one else remembers the date. "My father blamed me," she added. "Not outright, but in the way he stopped looking me in the eye." "And your mother?" "She passed years before. After that, it was just the house, the inheritance, and the echo of every word I didn't say in time." Her voice trembled just once, then steadied. "That's why the light matters. It was the one she always left on." Evan looked up at her. "Then I'm glad I fixed it." She looked back down at him. "You didn't just fix it. You didn't treat it like a job. You made it feel like it mattered." There was a pause, not awkward, just full. Then she asked, "Do you ever feel like, no matter how hard you work, you're still invisible?" Evan gave a quiet laugh. "Every Tuesday, and most Sundays." She turned toward him, intrigued. "I do the school drop-off in the same shirt I wore the night before. Nobody notices. I show up to repair something at someone's business, and they talk to me like I'm background noise. You get used to being overlooked. Doesn't it bother you?" "Sometimes," he said, "but then Lily runs up to me with a crayon drawing and says I'm her superhero, so no, not really." She smiled at that. Not a sad smile, a real one. Like something in her let go, even just a little. A flash of lightning broke the moment. The power flickered. Evan stood, instantly, instincts kicking in. "I'll check the panel." But she touched his arm lightly. "No, it's okay. Let it flicker. Sometimes it helps to see the shadows, to remember what's still standing after the light comes back." And in that flicker of almost darkness, he saw her more clearly than he ever had. Not the heiress. Not the woman with polished grace and generational wealth. Just a girl barefoot at 3 a.m. trying to believe that the things that broke in this house could still be mended. And maybe for the first time in a long time, she wasn't trying to fix herself alone. The next morning, Evan didn't mention the mansion to anyone. Not to Lily, as she climbed into the truck with sleepy eyes and a book tucked under her arm. Not to Mrs. Kovacs, who waved from her porch in that floral robe she seemed to wear year-round. And definitely not to the guys at the hardware store who teased him for taking late-night calls in haunted castles. Some things felt too quiet to name out loud, too fragile to explain. He wasn't expecting to hear from her again. But 4 days later, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't pick up. "Hi, it's me." The voice didn't need a name. "I was wondering if you could come back," she said. "The lights in the conservatory are acting up. Or maybe I just need to see someone who knows how to show up without asking what something's worth." Evan hesitated, not because he didn't want to go, but because he did. When he pulled up to the estate this time, the storm was gone. Instead, golden light poured over the lawn like something out of a painting. Rosa greeted him at the door, her usual cautious glance now replaced with something softer, almost like quiet approval. "She's in the garden," Rosa said. Evan looked down at his boots. "These don't do well on grass." Rosa smiled faintly. "She knows. She doesn't care." The garden was sprawling rows of trimmed hedges, a crumbling sundial fountains that hadn't flowed in years. But in the far back, beneath an arch of ivy and morning sun, she sat on a wooden bench in bare feet again, this time with a sketchbook in her lap. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said without looking up. "I wasn't sure either," he replied, "but Lily said I should. Smart girl." He sat next to her, not too close, just enough to feel the warmth of someone else choosing to stay. They didn't talk about work. Instead, she showed him the sketches, some incomplete, others almost childlike. A few were detailed drawings of broken things, a cracked teacup, a wilted flower, a chair with one leg missing. "I used to draw things before they broke," she said. "Now I only seem to capture them after." "They're honest," he said. She glanced at him. "So are you." Fact presenter voice subtly layered. Research shows that people in grief are more likely to create art not as expression, but as quiet preservation. A way of holding memory, still even as the world moves on. At some point, Evan stood to check the lights hanging above the pergola. A few wires were loose, some just old. She watched him work quietly, and when he finished, she didn't offer to pay. Instead, she walked over carrying a mason jar with sweet tea and a lemon slice floating inside. "Consider this my professional rate," she smiled. He took it, chuckling. "Fair, a little heavy on the lemon." "I'm learning balance," she replied. "Turns out you can't just fix everything with money, you have to let people bring their own light." They walked the rest of the garden in silence. At the far end was a locked greenhouse. She handed him a key. "My father locked it after my sister passed. Said nothing should grow in there anymore. I've never had the nerve to open it." Evan looked at her. "Do you want me to?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe not yet. But I wanted someone else to have the key, just in case I forget why I asked." He took it. Didn't say anything more. Just slipped it into his pocket like it was something precious. As the sun began to set, she turned to him. "Would you have dinner here next time with Lily?" Evan raised an eyebrow. "That's not a client service I usually offer." She smiled a little shy now. "This isn't business. This is me asking you to come back, not because I need something fixed, but because something feels a little less broken when you're here." He didn't answer right away. But later that night, he found himself placing a reminder in his phone: Wednesday, dinner at Maddox Hall. And he added, "Bring Lily, and the good shirt." Wednesday came faster than Evan expected. He found himself brushing off a shirt that hadn't seen daylight since Lily's last school recital, something with button sleeves, too stiff collar that never sat quite right. "Do I look weird?" he asked, half turning in the mirror. Lily, sitting cross-legged on the edge of the bed in her mismatched socks, looked up from her book. "You look like you're going to apologize to someone." He laughed. "I might be." She tilted her head. "Is she nice?" Evan paused. "She's quiet. Kind of like the house she lives in. Big. A little sad. But yeah, nice." Lily nodded, then hopped off the bed. "Then you should bring her something." "Like what?" She didn't miss a beat. "A flashlight, just in case the lights go out again." He blinked, then smiled. "You're smarter than me, you know that." "Everyone knows that, Dad." When they arrived, Rosa opened the door with a warmth Evan hadn't seen before. She bent slightly to greet Lily, her eyes kind. "You must be the superhero," she said in Spanish-accented English. Lily grinned. "I brought my flashlight." Good Rosa winked. Sometimes grown-ups forget to carry one. They found Lena in the dining room, not dressed up, not performing. Just in soft linen, barefoot as always, with two mismatched plates already set. The third she placed down as they walked in. She looked at Lily first. "You must be Lily. I've heard you like jelly sandwiches and books with dragons." Lily narrowed her eyes like a detective. "You spy on us." "No," Lena smiled. "Just good sources." Evan looked at her. She looked back. Nothing romantic. Just mutual quiet. That kind of glance that says thank you for coming back without needing to say it. Dinner was pasta. The sauce was slightly burnt. Evan tried not to react, but Lily was less diplomatic. After one bite, she politely pushed the plate back and whispered, "Is this the fancy kind that's supposed to taste like this?" Lena laughed. "No, this is just me being terrible at recipes." "I like that," Lily said. "It's honest." And just like that, something shifted. Fact presenter tone softly laid in. Research in child psychology shows that children of single parents often develop advanced emotional sensitivity, not from trauma, but from the quiet responsibility of watching how hard their parents try. After dinner, they moved to the conservatory. The rain hadn't come back, but the air smelled like it might. Lena brought out an old record player, vinyl dusty, but intact. "Ever dance with no music?" she asked. Evan shook his head. "Can't say I have." "Well," she said, placing the needle down, "then this counts as growth." A soft jazz tune filled the space, crackly and imperfect. Lily swayed in place, arms wide. "I like this. It's like what old people fall in love to." Evan raised an eyebrow. "Old people, huh?" "Older than me," she shrugged. Later, as they prepared to leave, Lena knelt down to Lily's level. "Thanks for sharing your dad tonight." Lily grinned. "He's okay once he stops pretending he's fine all the time." That hit Evan harder than expected. As they walked back to the truck, he stayed quiet. Lily, sensing something, slipped her hand into his. "Do you like her?" she asked. He looked ahead, thinking. "I like how I feel around her." "That's better," Lily said. "Liking someone can change. Feeling safe doesn't." That night, Evan sat on the porch long after Lily fell asleep, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. He wasn't afraid of being close to someone. He was afraid of what might be asked of him if she saw the parts of him even he didn't want to look at. But the thing was, she already had. And she didn't run. Evan had always been careful about keeping his world small. Not because he didn't want connection, but because he'd seen what happened when you let people too close. They either left, or they stayed just long enough to remind you why you built walls in the first place. But ever since that dinner at Maddox Hall, things started shifting. Lena had invited them again the following week for a small picnic in the garden. Then again, just to test a dimmer switch that didn't actually need testing. And Evan, without saying it, started looking forward to something that had no name yet. One Thursday morning, everything cracked a little. He was on a job at a strip mall 2 towns over rewiring an old bookstore when a man in a suit approached him, lean, polished, with the kind of voice that didn't ask questions, just expected compliance. Evan Cross. Yeah. The man handed him a card, Martin Kessler, Corporate Affairs, Maddox Group. I'm here to ask off the record what kind of relationship you have with Ms. Maddox. Evan squinted. What kind of question is that? A protective one. Martin continued. You're a single father living month to month doing side work off books. You've got a few unpaid medical bills from last year, 2 missed mortgage payments, and a former employer who said you walked off a job after an argument. Evan's stomach turned. Is this some kind of background check? No, Martin said flatly. This is a warning. That night, Evan didn't return Lena's message. Didn't respond to the photo she sent of the greenhouse finally being unlocked, the caption reading, I think I'm ready. Instead, he sat on his porch, the house quiet behind him, and stared at the streetlight flickering down the road. He felt it again, that old ache, the one that said you don't belong in places where people wear silk and talk softly about things you can't afford to break. He told himself she deserved someone who didn't bring shadows with him, someone who didn't need her to fight his ghosts. Lena noticed the silence immediately. She sent a second message, then a third. By day 3, she showed up at the hardware store where he sometimes did supply runs, in jeans and sunglasses, trying not to draw attention. You didn't answer, she said, walking beside him down the plumbing aisle. He didn't look at her. I figured it was easier. For who? For both of us. She exhaled. Is this about Martin? Evan's jaw tensed. So, you knew. She nodded. I didn't ask him to come. He does what he thinks is necessary to protect the company. But I'm not a company, Evan. He looked at her, then really looked. You're not, he said, but you come with one. And people like me don't survive long in those rooms. They find us out. They use words like risk and profile, and suddenly we're just liability. Fact presenter, weaved in softly. Over 40% of working-class Americans report feeling socially invisible when interacting with people from higher income brackets. Not because of hostility, but because of unspoken systems that quietly push them aside. I didn't ask you to be perfect, Lena said. I just asked you to stay. Evan stepped back. And what happens the next time someone like Martin shows up with a file on me? Then I ask him to read it aloud, she said, eyes steady. So he knows every part of you I already accept. He didn't expect that. Didn't expect the steadiness in her voice, the refusal to be embarrassed by his story. But you're you, he whispered. And you're the man who fixed my lights and gave my silence room to breathe, she replied. You think I'd trade that for clean credit and cocktail parties? There was a pause, long, weighty. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm still figuring out how to let people stay, Lena. She stepped closer, voice gentle. That's okay. I'm still figuring out how to not run. They stood in the middle of aisle 7 between PVC pipes and copper elbows surrounded by tools neither of them had names for. And somehow, it was the safest place either of them had been in weeks. That night, Evan sat with Lily reading her bedtime story. Halfway through, she stopped him. Is she coming back? He blinked. Who? The lady with the kind eyes. The one who listens to you even when you're quiet. He paused. Yeah, he said softly. I think she's already here. The next Saturday morning, a white envelope showed up in Evan's rusty mailbox. No stamp, no address. Just his name in black ink written by hand the way no one writes anymore. Inside was a card. On one side, a watercolor sketch of a small greenhouse with ivy creeping along the roofline. On the other, 5 words. I opened it. Come see. No signature, no need for one. He and Lily arrived just before dusk. She wore her favorite sweater with the elbow patches and clutched a tiny potted plant she'd brought from home, one she'd grown herself from a bean in science class. In case it needs company, she said. Rosa met them at the back entrance and guided them through the garden where early spring had begun to bloom in quiet, hopeful colors. At the greenhouse door, Lena waited. She wasn't in silk, not in anything soft or rich. She wore denim overalls, boots caked with soil, and a smudge of dirt on her cheek. Her hair was pinned up loosely, and her hands trembled just a little. I've been thinking about this for years, she said quietly, turning the key. But I didn't want to open it alone. The greenhouse had once been glorious. Now it was overgrown. Broken pots, dried vines, a cracked ceramic frog under the bench. Dust hung in the air like breath that hadn't been exhaled in a decade. Lily whispered, "It's like a secret garden." Lena knelt beside a raised bed and brushed her fingers across the soil. "My sister and I used to play here. She loved naming the flowers wrong on purpose, called sunflowers tiny suns with bad hair." Evan smiled, crouching beside her. Sounds like she was hilarious. She was everything Lena said, and after she died, I told myself I couldn't come in here without breaking. She looked up, her voice soft but unwavering. "But tonight, I'm still standing." At the far end, resting on a small wooden shelf, was a dusty tin box. Lena opened it, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and offered it to Evan. "My sister wrote this a week before the accident. I found it months later. Couldn't bring myself to read it until now." Evan unfolded the note. The handwriting was messy girlish. "Dear future me. If you're reading this, I hope you still laugh with your eyes. I hope you still believe people are good deep down, and you haven't gotten too serious to dance barefoot in the rain. Also, don't forget even grown-ups need safe places. Build them, for others and for yourself." Lena looked at him, eyes glistening. "I don't want to build this alone. I want to build something with someone who knows how to hold the broken stuff gently." Evan didn't say a word. He just reached into his bag and pulled out a fresh bulb. "Then let's start by fixing the light in here, too." Fact presenter tone subtly threaded. In grief therapy, creating something new in a place associated with loss is called transformational anchoring. It doesn't erase the pain, but it offers a parallel truth that healing and memory can exist in the same space. Later that evening, under soft string lights, Evan had reconnected. Lena cooked again, better this time. Lily helped stir the sauce while humming a song that Evan didn't recognize but liked instantly. When they sat to eat, Lena handed Evan a folded sheet of paper with a wax seal on it. "What's this?" "It's an offer, a strange one." He opened it slowly. It wasn't a job offer, not a check, not a contract, just a simple letterhead that read, "Maddox Community Renewal Project, lead consultant Evan Cross." Below it, vision, build sustainable housing, plus hands-on trades, training for single parents, funded by the Maddox Foundation, designed by those who know the weight of quiet resilience. Evan looked up, stunned. "I'm not qualified for this." Lena's voice was calm. "You are. You just don't have the paperwork. But you've been doing this work for years, in your garage, in your silence, in the way you show up." He stared at the document, then at her. "You knew what this would mean. I hoped what it could mean," she said. "The rest was up to you." Lily, watching quietly from across the table, whispered, "Dad. Yeah. You know how you always say light's no good if no one sees it? Yeah, I see it now." And that was the moment. Not a kiss. Not a dramatic confession. Just three people in a kitchen that used to feel too big, now filled with light and food and the kind of quiet that only exists when no one's pretending anymore. The kind of quiet that means home. 3 months later, the greenhouse bloomed. It wasn't perfect. The floor still creaked in places, and some of the vines grew wild no matter how often Lena tried to tame them. But it lived again with laughter, mismatched pots, chalk drawings from neighborhood kids, and a wooden plaque above the door, carved by Evan's own hands, still standing. The Maddox Community Renewal Project launched quietly just as they wanted. No press, no gala, just a warm spring morning and a ribbon that Lily cut with oversized scissors, grinning from ear to ear. Evan stood in the back, calloused hands shoved in his pockets, watching a dozen other single parents tour the training garage they'd built. He'd designed every inch of it himself. It wasn't sleek, it was honest like him. Lena stood beside him in work boots and a white shirt with soil on the sleeve. "This place feels like you," she said. He glanced sideways, patchy. She smiled, sturdy. That evening, they gathered around a picnic table behind the greenhouse. Rosa brought lemonade. Lily passed out hand-drawn maps of secret fairy zones around the property. Someone asked Lena if she was scared, entrusting this much of her family's legacy to a man with no pedigree, no title, and a truck that coughed every time it reversed. She just looked over at Evan, then back at the questioner. "Actually," she said, "I think this is the first time I've ever felt safe doing exactly that." Fact presenter voice, closing note. Every day, single parents across America carry burdens few ever see showing up, holding space-building futures from pieces. But sometimes, all it takes is one person seeing their quiet strength to change everything. Later, after the sun dipped low and the others had gone, Evan and Lena stayed behind to take down the folding chairs. Lena held up one with a broken leg. Guess some things still need fixing. Evan looked at her, not rushed, not hesitant. Some things do, he said, but not everything. She tilted her head. What doesn't? You, he said softly. You don't need fixing. You just needed someone who stayed until it stopped hurting. She didn't reply, just stepped closer, leaned her forehead against his and whispered, "Thank you for not leaving." He smiled. "Thank you for letting me in." And under the soft yellow lights they'd hung together weeks ago, Evan Cross, once just a struggling single dad fixing lights at 2 a.m., stood beside the woman who once lived in shadows, both of them bathed in the one thing they had unknowingly offered each other. A light that didn't need fixing. Just seeing. If this story moved you even in a quiet way, we invite you to subscribe to the Social Justice channel. We believe in stories that don't shout to be heard, stories where kindness, even when unnoticed, leaves the deepest impact. And if you're listening late at night, know this. Your light matters, even when no one sees it yet. End of story. Thank you for staying.